What's up, friends? Welcome to SPDM TV. My name is Mike, part of the SPDM crew, and I watch a lot of TV. We talk about various TV topics, reviews, and general appreciation of TV, past and new. You can follow me on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Serialized at MLHT2452 to see what all I'm watching. So, way back when, and by way back when, I mean a couple of years ago, it's not like it's that long. I used to write for a website where they gave me the opportunity to podcast. And what I did was that I'm taking a look at some of these episodes that I did before and looking to see if I can kind of introduce them to a new audience. So I am going to do a series where I release some of those episodes just so that I can showcase just some of the past work that I've done. Ability is, as I mentioned, I have a guest. Welcome back, Mike Whildin,
What's going on?
who was part of our epic, unreasonably long 4 hour plus Simpsons episode, which no
Yeah.
regrets. No regrets.
Yeah. But part of that's just because it was us and that was something we kind of always wanted to do. Part of that is because I kept on interrupting you and talking forever, like I have the bad habit of doing, which I apologize for that. But at the same time, it was a pretty great night.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So I quick story on which show Mike is come here to talk about. So I posted on Facebook not too long ago about, hey, does anybody want to talk about some TV on my podcasts plural, I suppose. And one of the shows I brought up was Breaking Bad, who I apologize to Scribe. I owed you a podcast on this a long time ago. But it is what it is. Life happens. And the first person who volunteered or not volunteered, who was like, I'll talk about Breaking Bad was Mike. So thank you for that. And I finally called his bluff on it. I'm like, hey, let's do this. Let's figure out a time to talk about this. So Mike, hello again.
Yeah,
Uh,
I wasn't bluffing.
I know you weren't bluffing. You don't bluff about things that we love from a entertainment medium. So Mike, when did you start watching Breaking Bad and why?
So I don't remember exactly when it got to the point that everything was streaming. It was still in the era where like people were still getting DVDs and Blu-rays and that kind of stuff. Netflix
DVD.
was definitely a thing, but like Disney Plus wasn't. So it was basically like Netflix or DVDs, that kind of thing. And so what used to happen with all my drama shows that I get would get into, because before that it was just, as you very well know, The Simpsons and Seinfeld, that seven, just mostly comedies. And so when I got into college, one of my best friends, just Keith Kirklestein, would I call him Stevie. So if I say Stevie, that's what I mean. But he would just be like, hey, the first one was Prison Break. He's like, hey, you should watch this show. And I'd never even heard of it. And I was like, all right, fine. And I watched it and I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I
I
fell in love with
I
it.
I know you swear up and down on Prison
I
Break, and it's yeah,
like
I
it
gotcha.
don't get me wrong, it has its negatives, but like it's a good
Every,
fun show.
every show does. It's all good.
But yeah, that was my first foray into it. So from there he just started into, Prison Break, Sons of Anarchy, Entourage for a little while, True Blood, which I never actually finished, but he was partially responsible for The Sopranos. Like he got me into a lot of those shows. If I was watching one of those shows, 90% of them were because he was doing so. Like we'd hang out, once or twice a week and we just watch shows forever, and it's just like that was just kind of what I did throughout my 20s and everything. And that's how I discovered him. And I kept telling him, one of these days I'm going to get you into a show. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm going to. And he's like, okay, and he kept getting me into new shows and new shows. And then I was at, I want to say FYE in a mall. Yeah. Yeah.
For all you
They
kids out there, a shopping mall is a place that, dudes like me and Mike used to go to go shopping for stuff that we just couldn't find at like Walmart or Target or even like a Best Buy. So
yeah, still do go to malls once in a while, but it's more just for the aesthetic and the experience of it. Kind of a
the aesthetics, like, is your aesthetic going to like a place that has just like empty shops and, coming soon signs?
I mean, there are malls that are like that, that they're like straight out of like The Walking Dead, but no, there are still some malls that have mostly open shops.
Yeah.
But anyways, this mostly open mall that I went to, there was an FYE, and I was looking through, all the different DVDs and everything, and I found a couple seasons of Breaking Bad, and I kept on hearing people at work talk about Yeah, I just remember hearing somebody, oh, Breaking Bad is so good. And they were just talking about how good it was. And I remember seeing commercials for it. And I kind of was like, I guess that looks like fun. I just never really, put the put the effort into seeing it. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna check this out. Everybody says it's so good. So I brought it home. I watched the first season. I couldn't stop. I mean, it's only 7 episodes because of the writer's strike. In that first season, they had to cut it short. And thank goodness they did, because that would have changed the series. Well, we'll get to that, but or maybe we won't. Who knows? But yeah. So I watched the first season, and then I immediately got a hold of Stevie, and I was like, "Hey, I've got the show. I'm gonna get you into a show." So he came over, and I just put it in the DVD player and hit play. And he's like, "All right, let's see what we're gonna watch." It came up as Breaking Bad. He's like, "Oh, all right, cool. I wanted to get into this." So I rewatched the first season with him, and then he and I could not stop watching the rest of the series. It was like every time he'd come over, we'd be up till 4 in the morning, because it would just be like, "All right, we got to do one more. Ah, dang it, we got to do one more." Just because it was that kind of a show. And by the end of it, we were just like, "Man, this might be like the greatest TV show of all time." Like, we were just blown away. And I do you mind if I tell one more quick story? And I
Uh,
promise it is actually quick.
if you can promise that it can be quick, even though our
Yes.
definition of quick is probably different,
Right. I
just
I, I understand I'm a
tell
short story long kind of guy.
tell
But
tell just tell
my
the
mom
story, man. Just tell the
I
story how you want to.
I got my mother into this show, and this was just a few years ago, and it's basically like, she doesn't really like a lot of like gore and intense stuff like that in her TV. So like I was trying to convince her on Sons of Anarchy once, because I watched some of that with my dad, and she was like, "Yeah,
Oh,
nope, not gonna happen."
that's a hard pass on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah. But I somehow convinced her to watch Breaking Bad with me, and she loved it. And she was like, and she told me at some point, she's like, "I didn't realize like how funny it is. Like, it's just with all their dark humor." And like, because Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul are very like,
They
they're
are.
very funny people, and their characters do in their own dark way have a lot of very funny moments, especially in that first season. And but yeah, she was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is great." So that scene towards the end of the first season, when Walt goes into Tuco's lair and does the fulminated mercury thing, and he's walking out of there, just with the bag, and he's like at the end and everything like that. I just remember looking to my left, and my mom's just wide-eyed with her mouth just gaped open, and then she looked at me and she's like, "Wow." And I was like, "Got her."
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the story of how I got into Breaking Bad, and how I later got my mother into Breaking Bad,
Nice.
and I'm proud
Nice.
of it.
Very nice. So we were talking about this beforehand about how, you mentioned the streaming thing, and I was kind of giving you a little bit of grief asking you what a DVD is, because we actually just had this experience at my house where we had to teach my daughter how to use a Blu-ray player because our internet's been down, and like Lord forbid the internet goes down and we can't watch Bluey just, by asking Google, it's like, "Hey, play Bluey." But unfortunately, you have to like get up and change the disc. Like I can remember watching, shows like Friends, and when the disc ends, you just roll your eyes because like, Jesus, I have to get up now and change the disc, even though it was a good opportunity to reflect, like, do I want to change the disc? Do I want to keep going, or should I like go outside and be with 3D people? But whatever. It's
Right.
neither here nor there. But I was one of those people who got into Breaking Bad through Netflix,
Mhm.
back in the day when Netflix was the place to like the only place that you could
Yep.
before, Hulu started stealing some of that thunder. And then now we have all
Disney
these
Plus and HBO and everybody came along and decided they wanted their own streaming platform, and now they've just reinvented cable TV.
pretty much. Yeah. So I got into it maybe about, I think it was during season three, and I think season three, correct me if I'm wrong, because I unlike you, I didn't rewatch this recently. Season three is right around the time that Gus Fring is introduced, right?
Yes, he's introduced in the middle to end of season 2. You don't really get to know a whole lot about him until like season 3 is when you first really get
Like
involved with him.
full,
Yeah.
yeah. So and I remember watching, like, I moved back from California in 2011 to where I live now, and
Oh yeah, I
I
remember
would
that.
I was watching Breaking Bad while I was doing my job search, trying to find employment so that I could like afford stuff. And I just remember just thinking to myself, like, a couple seasons into this, be like, I can make meth, right? And that's when I knew I was like, I need to turn this off. Like, I just need to turn this off right now because, like, this isn't a very good influence on me, but that doesn't change the fact that it was like quality television as well. So,
Yeah, I remember you saying exactly that like a decade ago, like making that exact like when we were talking about we were talking about just like how you get so into shows, and you said that thing like, oh yeah, you're watching Breaking Bad, it's terrible, but you go, I could like
I could
that's
do that. Yeah.
like you just kind of have that quick, yeah. I thank you for doing that one again for me.
I
Everybody else
was
listening isn't going to get it, but I that made me happy. Thank you, Hilti.
I was in a very vulnerable spot. I didn't have a job or anything like that. And, like,
You didn't explain that part last time.
yeah, like, I don't know. Like, anyways,
Yeah.
enough about me and my sad, pathetic life 12 years ago. So, Mike, give me some thoughts on Breaking Bad. Like, what is it about it that you like?
I mean, as far as intense drama shows about the anti-hero, I think at this point Breaking Bad is it's got to be it's the standard. Everything after Breaking Bad that is in somewhat of the same theme has at least some influence from Breaking Bad. And it's just how similar to Breaking Bad is this kind of is how, some people look at it, I guess. But that's just I noticed so many things. The show is so well written. I think that's the thing
Yes,
that the reason that it's stood the test of time, and the reason that so many people say it's one of the greatest shows, if not the greatest show ever, is just the writing was so phenomenal. But it wasn't just the writing; it was every aspect of it. The directing was great. Like all the camera, the cinematography of it was great. The acting, I mean, Bryan Cranston. Oh my
performances.
gosh, who would have thought that that Tim Watley, the dentist from Seinfeld, and the dad from Malcolm in the Middle would be one of the greatest television hero slash villains of all time, and he knocks it out of the park. It just
Yeah,
shows you just how talented he is, and like think about how big Bryan Cranston is now.
yeah.
Like he's huge. He's an A-list celebrity at this point. And it's just I always enjoyed there were fan theories that like will go one way or the other with where Hal from Malcolm in the Middle was actually Walt, and then he like kind of had a nervous breakdown and then moved to New Mexico and became Walter White. I always enjoyed that kind of thing.
I agree.
Uh,
Yeah.
but fan theories, yay! But yeah, no, it's the other like one thing that Breaking Bad does well, that Vince Gilligan does so well, and just the whole team is their use of sound
Oh yeah.
is
Yeah.
just they can set a tone by just showing like just a black and white frame of just a hose dripping, and just the sound of that drip for some reason is just like it just sets the tone of like, oh, something's gonna happen. I can't really, I guess, put it into good words because I'm not good at doing that, but watching the show is just they're experts, and the further they go with it, the better they get, where it's just every sound in the show matters,
Yep.
just like every plot point matters, everything that happens matters, every different camera view matters, and you have to pay attention. But it's not a show like it's not like Dark where you're like, okay, I'm paying attention but I still don't understand, I gotta look this up. If you're paying attention you get it, but it's just, yeah, it's the absolute standard from all those different aspects of a show and just of entertainment in general. And I think it's the pinnacle, it's the peak of the anti-hero story, and it's very realistic. I mean, it's still relevant today, unfortunately, because just the meth and heroin and everything are still
Drugs.
now.
Yeah.
Right. But just the idea of just a normal guy trying to do what's best for his family and making those choices, and then just descending into madness as he gets further into this world, it's relatable. It's a time-tested tale. And there are a lot of shows that do it well for a little while, but they don't quite stick the landing. But
Ozark.
what's that?
Like a show like Ozark that is very
Yeah, I
heavily influenced from something like
oh
this. A
yes.
guy gets into, quote unquote regular guy gets into like a bad situation because he needs, due to like weird circumstances, and then all of a sudden it just becomes like somewhat of a, like, it just gets too big. It just
Right. And
progressing to the
and
point where it's just
and
unsustainable.
And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Ozark, but I did like it is very blatant. I'm like, oh, this is very like Breaking Bad. Like I remember somebody that had watched before me told me, I was like, what's Ozark like? They're like, oh, it's a lot like Breaking Bad. And yeah, they're pretty much that up.
But it's just not
But
as
yeah,
good.
it's
It's just
like it's
it
well,
it's
yeah, it
it's just not as good, or it's not as good. Like granted, yes, I did enjoy Ozark a lot. And just there are just some things that worked much better in Breaking Bad, like a lot of the technical stuff, the writing, direction, acting, everything just around just
every aspect of it.
every aspect of it is great and it matters. Whereas with Ozark, just it didn't have that same spark, and that's okay. That like I'm inclined to say, like, yeah, the biggest difference between Ozark and a show like Breaking Bad is Vince Gilligan. I hate to like kind of just make it so trivial, but like Vince Gilligan is like a big reason why this show works because he takes
Hmm.
such great care of these characters, of the story as well, and just making things matter, making characters, giving them all something to do,
Yeah.
unless you're like, I don't know, like Walter Jr. didn't really have much to do, unfortunately. And like
I
this
disagree. He played. I mean, he had a very important role, and I think R.J. Mitty did a great job with what was given to him. Just as far as like, because I mean, his presence, and I mean, like Holly, the baby, didn't do anything,
that's a
but
bit
she's the
that's
reason
the
that Walt is doing everything that he's doing at first, But like, it's not just Holly. Like he loves his son too. Think about there are so many scenes where Walt like kind of comes, but he'll be in like Ed being on the edge of being a gangster, and then he'll be around his son, and it's like it just brings him right back into just human. I'm a teacher, and this is my son, and I don't want like the Walt's most human moments, especially later in the show when he's just a villain and you're just like you pretty much want him to die. His most human and most relatable moments later in the series especially are when he's around his son, and his son's interaction as he's trying to like figure out what's going on with his dad is very important. Anyways, we don't need to debate that forever. But speaking of characters, Jesse Pinkman is a huge reason too, because in a show with the anti-hero, like say like The Sopranos, for example, which, without The Sopranos, I don't know if there's a Breaking Bad, but I digress.
that's another
Uh
that's a
let's
another topic for another day.
Exactly. But like, Tony Soprano is just going to go further into the mob thing, and of course he is. And pretty much all the characters are just going to, like they're trying to do good, but they're just going to go further into it. Jesse Pinkman, one of the two main characters, Breaking Bad for him is a redemption story because he starts on the very bottom, and yeah, in a weird way through making meth and everything, he finds himself. But like, it's he tries to do the right thing throughout the series and gets progressively, closer to doing so. And, when you have a character that's as flawed, but still in a weird way as pure as Jesse Pinkman, to go along with somebody like Walter White, who's supposed to be the pure one because he's coming from the normal world, quote unquote. It's such a great dynamic, and it still holds up today, mostly because of the writing and the directing and the story, and just like I said, even the sound. The characters are a huge part of that too, though. It stays relatable. Like you said, a show like Ozark just doesn't do it as well. It just gets too big. Breaking Bad got big, like he's dealing with big things, but it's still like they ground it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Jesse, when you first meet Jesse in the pilot, you can't help but think it's like this guy's a joke, right? Like
Yeah.
this guy, and then to see because Jesse Pinkman, I was reading this article on Entertainment Weekly about the most unlucky characters in all of TV. And it's not ranked or anything like that. It just goes through it's like these are characters who have had like a raw deal to them
Jesse
throughout the
Pinkman
course.
and Spider-Man are the two that I would think of.
Well, you have Jesse Pinkman, you have Sansa Stark, you have like a bunch.
Yep.
There's a ton of people out there, but like if you really think about it, it's like anytime that Jesse Pinkman gets to a point where he's like, I'm done or anything like that, he gets roped back in pretty
And you
much in
genuinely
so
are
many
like, oh,
like in
because
so many different ways that's like, God man, that sucks. But at the same time, you're just like, yeah, like, okay, like
right.
That
Well,
that
now,
sucks,
well,
man.
I don't want to start this part of it yet, but we'll discuss whether or not you were supposed to root for Walter. But like, regardless, even though some of those times when you're kind of rooting for Walt to get back into the meth thing and get, his revenge on Gus or anything you're trying to do there, whenever it's Jesse and he's almost out and then he gets roped back in, whether it's through Walt or through anything else, every time you're just like, oh man, you can't help but feel for him.
Jesse has like two of the most like devastating moments of this entire series. Like, and like we're obviously going full spoiler because I'm sorry, if you haven't watched this by now and you're listening to this, that's on you at this point. Plus, also,
Now,
it's been a while. It's been a while for this,
Now, there
so
are people, I have talked to people that haven't seen it. So I will say, if you are listening to this and you have not seen this show and we haven't already spoiled too much of it yet, stop listening at this point and go start watching the show and then come back and listen to this podcast in another 3 weeks or whatever, however long it takes you to finish the show. Because it's phenomenal. It's
yeah.
absolutely phenomenal, and I encourage you to watch it. But yeah, from this point on, we're gonna spoil some things. So this is your chance to stop this podcast and
Okay,
go and watch the show.
we give it
Sorry,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now we're in full spoiler talk, even
here
though
we go.
we've gotten there. But Jesse Pinkman waking up to his dead girlfriend who choked on her vomit while he was passed out from drug use. We'll get into like, Walt could have done something about it and he
Yeah.
didn't. That's a whole separate issue. That for me was
Huge scene.
that's the moment for me where I was like, I don't think I consider Walt an anti-hero anymore. He's a
Mhm.
straight up villain, you know. And yes, you could be a villain with, a compelling backstory and things like that. For me, and because that also happened early enough in the show where it's like, this is a point of no return type of thing. And it
Mhm.
just gets progressively worse. And then the second incident is the whole thing with Jesse going to find Gail. Well, it's like, oh, like Walter had to have this plan, and poor Jesse just gets the raw end of the deal of that. Like, sure, Walt is in a pretty dire situation himself with that, but dear Lord, like first of all, that episode is like super tense and just
Mhm.
like who what's gonna happen? Like, and then the pain you see on Jesse's face where it's like, I'm so sorry, man, but I have to do this. Well, okay, no, he doesn't have to do it, but like he has to make the choice. It's like, yeah, I'm making the choice. I'm gonna do
And
this.
that screws him up for a long time, if not the rest of the show, too.
He I mean, he was
I mean,
already he was already pretty screwed up, and arguably he was screwed up mainly because of his relationship with Walter. But and all the other stuff that happened before all of this happened as well. But at the same time, it was like, oh, like
it's Jesse's
there,
point of no return. That's where he get like, yeah. I am gonna throw a third one in there real quick when he finally has his relationship with that one girl and her son, and then they kill her in front of him
yeah,
after they
that's
kidnap him. It's just like that's just
rough.
one of those like, man, come talk about kicking somebody while they're down. It's just, it's man.
That was all pretty crappy. And yeah, like I can't remember if I read that at some point or another they were considering, do we need Jesse in all of this? And if they were to have done that, like if they were to do something where they were like either cast Jesse aside or even like kill him off, like the show would be
Yeah,
just completely different and not in a good way.
exactly.
Like,
Well, the other thing I've read too was they were really considering much earlier on killing Hank, Dean Norris's character, the brother and the DEA brother-in-law,
that
Hank.
that
And I
that
can't believe we haven't
also
even mentioned him up to this point.
that also
He was a
would
pivotal part of this.
that also would have been a giant mistake because
Yeah.
that the progress that Hank makes with his investigation in trying to find this elusive Heisenberg character, it hits a lot of roadblocks and a lot of dead ends. I'm sure, just like a lot of investigations do. But oh, go
Yeah.
ahead, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna say no, you do it. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I invited it, but fair enough. Okay. So it's one of those things where the moment that Hank figures out that Walter is Heisenberg is one of the great oh shit mic drop moments of recent at minimum recent television history, if not all of television history. And I will never forgive Breaking Bad for helping perpetuate this trend where it's like, yeah, we're gonna split the final season into two parts. Like, no, like, come on, like, why are we doing this? I do know that the reasons why they do that is, for things like Emmy's consideration to pay your staff a lot less, all that stuff. There's pretty crappy reasons why that happens, but that's one thing that like it's one of the only things that I knock Breaking Bad for. Like you didn't have to split up the final season, but the show was that popular at the time where it's like, yeah, I get that. And to end the first part of the final season with, just this giant discovery, it's like, now I'm just waiting for this big showdown.
Yeah. I know they call it like season five, and then like Netflix, it's listed, it's all listed as season five, but like in the DVDs, it was like the
Season
fifth
five,
season and then the
part
final
one.
season.
Yeah,
It,
fifth
it was it
season.
was it was season five and then Breaking Bad the final season, which was really just season five part two. But they at least tried to kind of make it seem. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's frustrating, but if you were going to end a season that way, like, oh my gosh, phenomenal! What a moment. And I remember my buddy Chris Rusty saying, you remember Rusty? He told me once. He said the episode, spoiler alert, if we haven't already gotten there, the episode where Hank dies, he said, is maybe the greatest hour of television he'd ever watched because the entire time it's just like they don't even show. I didn't realize this till I rewatched it recently. They don't even show the opening credits and like the Breaking Bad like theme real quick and everything and like introduce all the actors and everything. They don't do that until 28 minutes into that episode because it's so intense just right to start off with, and then you get Walt kind of trying to put himself together, and then everything breaks down with his family. It's like it's such a ride, and yeah, I'd put that up again, not against, but I would put that up there with the last couple of episodes in season six of Game of Thrones, the battle, and then the Cersei blowing up the Sept and the reveal and everything, and everything that happened in that final episode. Those I'd put up there too. But yeah, it's just like it's oh man, just what a ride. And Hank's like his journey, as we were saying earlier, his like he hit some roadblocks trying to find Heisenberg, yes, but he's always so much closer than you would expect anybody to be. Like it's almost like he just jumps three-quarters of the way through a lot of the thing, and you're like, whoa, he's already there. How is he not? And Hank just barely keeps getting away from him.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, I and that aspect of the show too provides a lot of tension and a lot of extra thing to keep in the back of your head about it. Side note, Hank is awesome. Like
Yes.
he's hilarious, if not a little inappropriate. But I mean, think like where it's full spoiler mode now. He takes out Tuco. He takes out the twins. He's not somebody to mess around with.
No, no, he's definitely not. And yeah, when Hank dies, it was just absolutely it was devastating. Particularly because just the tension in that scene, because Walt just sees full well like the results of like some of the decisions he's made, just particularly from that season. Like
Mm.
putting his eggs in like this gang that he's kind of just invested all of his time with, and then also just like he told Hank, it's like, dude, stay away, like this isn't going to work out for you, and sure enough it doesn't. And it's just, you think about just how rough that is for Marie, who like was never a huge fan of like Marie or Skylar, if I'm being perfectly honest, but that doesn't change the
That's
fact that
because
like,
they, as people, were very annoying. As
yeah,
characters, they were great.
yeah. So, but like, it still was like, oh, this sucks. Like, and I think that was just the moment where it's like, for Walt, it's like, I think I've gone too far. And like, it just kind of reminds me of, there's a TikTok thing that I saw recently where like it's somebody who's just kind of like looking around, is like, am I the problem? And someone just screams like, of course you are. Like yeah, Walt like done
Yeah,
messed up, and like this is what like too far,
right.
possibly gets you from that.
Because up until that point, he was very Principal Skinner about the whole thing. Like, am I out of
Principal
touch?
Skinner,
No, it is the children who are wrong. Like, yeah.
right?
But side note, did you know Bryan Cranston voiced a couple of monsters in the original Power Rangers show?
Yes, yes, I did hear
Yeah,
about that.
that kind of blew my mind when I found that out. The snizzard.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah,
Just so Hank's great, and then the parade of people that they bring in as like antagonists and villains and everything like that. I guess you
and
have
just
to
supporting characters in general.
right. I think the one in general that like stands out, like there's two that stand out the most for me. Saul Goodman's
Mhm.
introduction into this brings like an interesting angle into this because it's like, oh, like you're the cleanup guy, you're the one that like gets these criminals out of jail, which is just like an interesting wrinkle that you just didn't expect. And he was Saul Goodman, who like Bob Odenkirk is perfect for that
Mhm.
role, and he was just supposed to be just a guest star in
Yep.
that, but everybody, including myself, loved him so much that it eventually spun into Better Call Saul, which I kind of like Better Call Saul better than Breaking Bad.
Yeah. I I've heard that. It's
I read about that once in a book.
Yeah, there you have to commend Vince Gilligan for being able to do an entire prequel and then at the end sequel about such a popular hit show. Because spinoffs normally, like, yeah, Frasier worked, but like, it's just
A
like
lot of
for
a
most,
lot of them don't. A lot of them don't
yeah,
work though.
and for the spinoff to be as good as, if not arguably better than the original, it's like what a creative genius that guy is. I mean, I still like Breaking Bad better, but that's just, I think, because it just has that special place for me. I still think it's the greatest show of all time. However, I think part of that
Great.
is because
Yeah, hold on.
but
You
Better Call
greatest.
Saul is a prequel.
You said greatest drama, not greatest show.
Yes,
Greatest drama.
my apologies. You are 100% correct. Greatest drama of all time, I think, as far as television goes. It's weird because I'm gonna like I say that, but I also don't want to say anything like, well, what does it have over Better Call Saul? I'm like, nothing. It just like they're just two different shows, and that's just kind of the. I think Breaking Bad was the standard bearer, and there's no Better Call Saul without Breaking Bad.
Right.
So it's
Right.
kind of like
Well,
that's part of it. Because the reason the Better Call Saul is so good is because it's giving you all the, I mean, because of the acting and the writing and all the same stuff, of course, but it's not like a Vince Gilligan original show. There's already a world built in and all this backstory that you like. If you watched Breaking Bad, you get so much more of that show. Like when they zoom out that one time when Mike's parked in the parking lot of Los Pollos Hermanos, and you're just like, oh, like
oh,
somebody that hadn't seen Breaking Bad is going to see that and be like, "What's the big deal here?" I don't understand why they made that so dramatic and everything. So yeah, I think that's the only reason I say that is because I think without Breaking Bad, there's no Better Call Saul, and it doesn't work as well. And like honestly, I think Better Call Saul would just become kind of a version of Breaking Bad if Breaking Bad didn't already exist. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of
I I get what you're saying. I'm not sure I agree with you, but I get what you're saying because my favorite parts of Better Call Saul have nothing to do with Breaking Bad. Like those first couple seasons where, Jimmy McGill is like, you're trying to like actually do the right thing. And the moment when he says that in the courtroom, it's like, it's all good, baby. It's like, okay, this is your inflection point. This is your point of no return, which is a far cry from the other people's point of no return. But it's like, oh, okay, this is where you start to turn now. But yeah,
I had somebody that wasn't thrilled with like the finale of that, and we're not to spoil any of Better Call Saul too, so I'm not going to do that. But they were just like, "Oh, it was so tame, like nothing happened." I was like,
I
"I don't
just
know. If you were along with the show, I do not agree
I
with that at all.
I did
I thought it was a great finale."
the finale of Better Call Saul, like the finale of both of these shows are both fantastic. And that's
Yes.
just a testament to because both series had like similar trajectories in terms of the show got better as the series went on, which you sometimes don't get that with shows.
And that's actually pretty rare.
Yeah.
especially these days. I mean, like you get to season 4 of a show now, and it's kind of like, all right, well,
We're
it's still
still
good, but we're starting to kind of see we're starting to kind of get past the peak here. And I mean, it happens with comedy shows too. I mean, one show you and I love, Community, was getting better and better and better, but it just couldn't, And with Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, both, they wrap it up in not just an appropriate way, but an excellent way.
yeah.
And it's one of those few shows. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing with Breaking Bad is the rewatch value of it. You keep picking up things every time you watch it again. So like it's so much fun for me to watch it with somebody. Like when I got my mom into it, because then I was like seeing things. I was like, oh, I don't even remember this. And but that like it's gonna be a satisfying conclusion, one way or another. Whereas something like think about Game of Thrones now. Think about how many people are going back and rewatching Game of Thrones and talking about. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about going back and rewatching it after they watched the way that show ended.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like maybe some people are like, I kind of want to try. Like I know, like I was into it as much as the next guy, but like after that ending, I still, that was years ago, and I'm still like, yeah, I don't want because there's so many things along the way that they build up to that just either don't get paid off or don't matter, and all that.
Right.
And a lot of that happens with a lot of shows, some worse than others. That obviously before Dexter had their, whatever. But like,
that that
but like,
that
yeah,
that does not happen here because
right.
there's so much about this show that you've got to be pretty savvy to notice to notice a lot of this stuff, and also sometimes you gotta wait a while for a lot of this stuff to pay off, like
Mm,
just all the stuff that happens. Like I mentioned the thing that happened with Jane and Walter and everything like that,
mm.
and you're waiting to see, like, is this going to come back to play at some point or another? And it does eventually. Okay. And that's something that continuously happens with a lot of the things in Breaking Bad. And that's something that I give it a lot more points for that, is that everything matters to some extent or another. And even if it's something small, it becomes something big. And
Right.
that's great. That's great. You want to see more things like that because, like you said, it re-ups the rewatchability, but also that's just great storytelling as well. You don't have some like weird MacGuffin that just comes into play or anything like that, just randomly out of nowhere. Like, no, this was something that was set up a long time ago that you weren't paying attention to, and now it matters again.
Well thought out.
Yeah.
And yeah, to kind of bring that full circle, that's kind of how I was saying at the beginning. It's not even just the storytelling. Not everything matters as far as the story goes, but also the sound, every camera angle, everything they show you, every aspect of this show matters at every moment of it. Every musical choice, every aesthetic choice they make for like even just a logo on some business, like the Vamanos Pest. It's kind of just like it's funny but kind of weird. I don't know. It's just everything gives it that vibe that works perfect for it. And yeah, it's a masterclass in television storytelling, and there aren't a lot of shows like it. It's the standard, and like it was influenced by a lot of shows before it. Sorry, there was a large flying in something in my apartment here, but sorry.
So, but yeah, like
Just
I
and Mike just saw me just looking all over the room as I was saying some of that, and he just giving me a look, and yeah, that was warranted. Anyways, go ahead.
it's all good. It's all good. So it's all good, man. Right. So to go back as well, because there's one other character that I want to mention that we haven't really talked about that much as Gus Fring, who
Yeah.
Gus Fring may very well go down as one of the great villains of all time
Oh,
in
yeah.
in television, simply because he's somebody that you don't really understand his ruthlessness until there's an episode, I believe it's the start of the fourth season. It's called Box Cutter,
Cutter.
where you see it's like, oh, this guy's serious. Okay,
It's like,
okay.
oh, uh-oh. Like, yeah, that's that uh-oh moment when you where you look at Jesse and Walt standing there having seen all been witness to all of this, and you're just like, oh no,
You've
it
you
yeah,
you've
that's
you've tangled with the wrong person. And don't get me wrong, Jesse and Walt have tangled with a lot of the wrong people in this
mm,
series. But Gus was the one was like, yeah, you're in over your head until they figure out a way to get out of it. And I personally think that like I'm glad that they didn't let it get to a point where it's like the Gus versus Walt showdown was the end game. Even though in that final season I missed having a primary antagonist until you kind of realized like, oh, the primary antagonist in this season is Walt. Like,
yeah,
yeah, because that moment in the final season when Walt's meeting with that guy who's just like meeting to negotiate terms of this
same,
and
say my name.
yeah, and the guy's like Eisenberg, and Walt's like, "You're goddamn right." It's like, ooh, I'm starting to get afraid a little bit.
Epic, by the way, epic scene, epic line, just as far as television goes. But yeah, on Gus. I remember Giancarlo Esposito said that like it was kind of a style choice that he made. I think that really put it over. Thankfully, he did because it was basically like this is a business. Like, hey, it's a businessman. He acts like he's quiet, he's professional, and he just kind of chose to be a lot more muted instead of trying to be menacing. He just was like, yeah, man, and everything like that. And it adds so much to it, especially like what you said when you the episode Box Cutter, when you have a scene like that and you're just like, oh, okay, this guy's for real. I understand why everybody's afraid of him. I understand why this guy's where he's at. And then there's another scene later in that season where like the rival like cartel members are like scoping, they're like firing on the chicken place, and Gus just walks straight out like directly at the sniper, no armor or anything. He just starts waltzing out and he stops and he puts his arms up like, come
Do
on,
it,
let's
do
go.
it. Yeah.
And they don't do anything. It's just like that confidence. You're just like, oh,
Oh, this
I
is
it's
this is who we're dealing with
it's
right now.
yeah, he's definitely a villain, and you definitely like root for Walt against him because obviously Gus is not a good person. But there are moments where you see that and you're just like, all right, this guy's kind of awesome in that sick kind of way. Like
Yeah. Well,
that's
and like I love how they give him backstory, but that backstory is not meant to redeem him at all. It is meant to give him context. That's it. And that context matters at the end of the day, but it is also not meant as a mechanism to be like, yeah, like it's understandable where this guy came from. It's like, no, this guy is just
give you just enough because they don't go too much into his backstory. They almost give it a Joker quality to it, where like there are some stories that are completely different that lead up. You're not really sure which one it is. Like the Don calls him the general at some point, and so you're like, was he military? He was in Chile. Like he kind of like mentions a few things about that, but you never actually get the full story on exactly what. And that's by design. He still has that mystery behind him, but they do give him just enough backstory for you to understand why he is the way he is, why he's where he's at now. And it's, it's just, it's beautiful.
what do you have anything else that you wanted to kind of mention about Breaking Bad before we kind of
I think the
wrap up
last
a little bit for legacy and like what the show kind of like means and everything
the
like that? Like anything else?
the last thing you mentioned before we started recording, the one discussion we needed to have, and I still agree with it, is are we supposed to root for Walt?
I
Like,
mean,
there are times in the show where you're going to root for him more than others, of course, but just as an overall arc, it's kind of one of those like, is Walt a hero or a villain? I remember seeing some article about like Breaking Bad's best villains ranked or something, one of those BS things. And I was like, well, obviously Gus is going to be number one. And if Gus isn't number one, then it's going to be Walt himself. But like, otherwise, I don't know how it could possibly be anybody else. And like, number one was Jack Welker. And I was like, no, I don't agree. He's not in the show enough to have that much of a role. But yeah, if there's a bigger villain in Breaking Bad than Gus, it's Walt,
Yeah.
also the protagonist of the story.
Right.
So
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that in a sense, just how it's complicated. Obviously, something like that, it's complicated because you spend so much time empathizing with Walt in his situation, how he wants because when the part of the story for Breaking Bad was Walt wants to make enough money for his family to be okay after he's gone from his cancer diagnosis. Like, okay, there is something, dare I say, noble about
mhm.
that. But then you see it from the jump, like in early episodes of season one, where it's like, okay, like this, I'm not sure. Like I could root for him overall, but I can't root with this particular thing that he's doing right now.
Season one, for the most part, you still kind of root for him because, like, it seems like it's just the story of him getting deeper into this world that he's making a choice to commit a crime, but for the benefit of his family. And of course, it just keeps leading him further than he wants to go. And everything he does, he's like, all right, that solves that problem, and it just brings up a bigger problem. Just through the entire first season, you can root for him, absolutely. Season two, though, is where you really start to go like, where he kind of like the first time I think you really see it exposed, like where they blatantly tell you like this is more than just about his family. And I don't remember what the music is, but whatever the music choice is for the way they end this episode, it feels dark and just kind of uncomfortable, but it's perfect when he's in the hardware store and he just drops the paint bucket on the shelf, and he walks out to like the meth heads that he just saw, he noticed walking by in the store, and he goes up and he says, "Stay out of my territory." And he gets that little grin on his face because they leave because they're afraid of him. That's the first moment where you're like, okay, this isn't just about his family anymore. So now everything he does has a different motive. So that's when you can kind of start going like, should we root for him? And of course it builds like that for the rest of the show. But yeah, I'd argue the entire first season, he's still very likable, if not in the wrong situation.
The first season, you could say like he had a raw deal. He makes some bad decisions, but overall, you're just like, yeah, like I'm still hoping for the best with this
Mm,
guy. And then for me, again, my point of no return with Walt was when he let Jane die for a couple reasons. One, because he knew that that would just keep Jesse tethered to him the whole time, but also it's just that's a crappy thing to do for somebody who, for somebody in particular who was in a dire situation anyways with a terminal cancer diagnosis, for him to just not provide any aid or help or anything like that, which is, for somebody who's also married to like a DEA agent who like that's part of their job is to help investigations and things like that.
yeah.
That was just the point where I was like, I'm not sure that I can.
Mm,
He is the main character of the show, but he is not the main protagonist anymore.
yeah. And you, like you said at the beginning of that, it's complicated. And that complexity is part of what makes this story and this show so great and so entertaining to watch, because they stick the landing. It's not just complicated for complicated sake. It's every part of it is just so good. My point of no return was a little later. I mean, like obviously that's that one of those big moments where you're like, oh man, what are you doing? But there were still moments in season three, I think, where I kind of went like, all right, well, at least like he's kind of walking the edge of, point of no return, but he's still occasionally trying. But when he poisons that
Rock,
Jesse's girlfriend's kid,
Rock, yeah.
yeah, and to get Jesse fully back in and everything, and it's just like, and the season ends that way. And when I was rewatching it recently, I remember just having that feeling at that point, like, oh man,
Right.
that's just.
Well, and then also both of those incidents come back up, and
Mhm.
Walt and Jesse have this like big moment together where it's like you ruined my life, and like, well, Watch Jane die. Sorry, it's like, wow, that was a bit of a dick thing to say, but like,
Yeah,
okay.
he has a lot of those in that last season. He is just a straight up jerk, for
Yeah,
lack of a different word, in that final season.
yeah,
My buddy Keenan, I remember he was watching it at one point, not too long after I'd watched it the first time, and I just asked him like, "So where are you?" And he's like, "I'm at the point where I pretty much want him to die." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, you're in that last season." Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's
But I love that's part of what makes the ending so great too. I absolutely love the scene when Skylar gives like, all right, 5 minutes and then I'm calling the police. And so he gives his final little encounter with Skylar. And he's like, I just want to let you know everything I did, and she's like, if I have to hear one more time about this, this crap about that you did this for the family. And he just goes, I did it for me. It felt good. It gave me power. And he kind of just explains, he says it in a very human way, just like I was good at it, and it was just like it was something that made me feel alive, and it's not something I didn't know about, and like yeah, I didn't intend it at first, but like basically it was like I fell in love with this business, and it completed me, kind of thing, and so
mhm.
I did it for me, and it's just he gives it to the audience like this, but if there's any doubt, he's confirms like he just kind of that self reflection of like what, I did this for me,
Yeah,
dang, like just growth if there is any for him.
for sure.
But yeah, I can't say enough good things about this show. I really can't. One quick, just 1 minute thing on Skylar and Marie. Yeah, you're not a big fan of them. I'm not a fan of them either. Like just not as people as like the actresses that portray them. I don't have any problem with them. But just like if those characters were actual people, you would be very annoyed by them. Yes. But I think that's a testament to both the writing and the acting from both of them, that makes those characters so grating. And even though a lot of times you completely understand why Skylar is so upset, and so mad, because of course she would be, there are still times where you're just like, dude, like, shut up. Like, come on, Skylar. You're just, but, Skylar's no slouch. Like, she's really smart. It's, for the first two seasons, it's all about like, Walt's keeping this from everybody, and how long can he keep it? Because the family's gonna find out eventually. And you're like, how long is like it gonna be before Skylar finds out? How long? Skylar finds out at the very beginning of season three, if not really in between, where she just like reveals like, yeah, you're a drug dealer, and he's like, what? And she just puts it all together,
Yeah.
and she's very very intelligent, and for all of her annoying qualities, it's that's she makes a difference.
She does. She does. And I don't know, like the moments where like her and Walt's marriage, they go through like wave after wave of just like, hey, it's clicking, hey, it's not. It's the perfect encapsulation of like what marriage is. Just subtract the drugs and the cancer and
Right.
everything like that. It just like the ups and downs that just come with their relationship is just it's so like kind of relatable in a sense, and it's just like yeah, like and then
it's
when
it's
these
some
like and then when these big events happen, it's like, oh, okay, like
yeah.
I get it. Like, and some of these events like brought them closer, and then they pushed them further apart. Just
and
relationship. Yeah.
and they react in the way that people would react.
Yes. Very much so.
These characters are always very human. That's the thing. You don't have anybody that's just like, sometimes you have a character where like, there's no human that exists that's like this.
No,
But
no.
no, Breaking Bad, they're all just human beings in their respective, roles in life, if you will.
Mike, any final thoughts? Any lasting legacies for Breaking Bad for you?
I mean, I kind of said at the beginning, I think it's this, so many intense drama shows, especially about the quote unquote anti-hero, or about, with characters that are descending into madness, descending into, the wrong side of the law, or, just descending into evil. This is the standard. And a lot of shows these days, are indirectly, if not directly influenced by Breaking Bad. And it's always just like, how similar is this to Breaking Bad, or what, it's the standard. Everything that came after it is influenced by it, and I feel like everything that came before it that was similar was leading up to it. It just, there are shows that came before Breaking Bad that were, had a similar theme. Like I mentioned The Sopranos earlier, that definitely, paved the way. But I just Breaking Bad is the pinnacle. And yeah, it's to me, it's the greatest drama television show of all time.
The only other thing that I'll add to that, so a couple of things. One, this look, there was a time when there was no channel that could compete with HBO in terms of prestige TV.
Agreed.
And
Of course, I agree. That's true. Yeah,
I,
sorry. Go ahead.
I've argued that FX has the probably the greatest catalog that could go toe to toe with HBO. AMC in this heyday with between Breaking Bad, Mad Men, and The Walking Dead
Yeah.
at its peak was must see TV. And like Breaking Bad was so you don't get a lot of shows that can capture the national consciousness the way that I would argue the last three shows to do something like that: Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad,
Yeah.
and probably Lost in its heyday before it
Yeah.
got too weird and just too much.
Yeah.
But this show put AMC on a trajectory. It's like, hey, The Walking Dead show that you can make great television. Mad Men and Breaking Bad showed that AMC could make prestige television. And
Yes.
it is something that now that Better Call Saul is done, AMC has been struggling to come up with something that can top both of those, which it sucks but that's just how Hollywood works. It is a what have you done for me lately type of thing.
Hmm.
And AMC has done nothing for me lately because the AMC the Breaking Bad verse that it created, that's gonna leave a pretty giant void
Yeah.
for AMC to try to figure
Yeah.
out.
To ask how do you top this? Like, what do you mean top this? Like, there's no topping this.
But
It's
but that's Hollywood's
yeah. No,
job.
I
So
know. It's yeah.
that's Hollywood's
I know
job.
what you're saying.
So between AMC this put AMC on the map to some extent or another. It put this show propped up Netflix perhaps more than like a lot of other shows out there. This was before like these huge licensing deals for things like the Seinfeld catalog or
Yeah.
before Friends got on
The
Netflix or became
the
as
the,
popular
on,
as it
the
did.
only show I can think of that affected Netflix as much was The Office.
Yeah,
Because
for
that
sure.
was actually why I finally bit the bullet and went like into and actually got Netflix because I wanted to watch The Office and I didn't have access to it. And then hey, guess what? Breaking Bad's here. I can rewatch that.
But I think but I think the difference there is that Breaking Bad grew with Netflix,
Yeah.
whereas The Office was pretty much done, like and past its prime as well, past its prime
Yeah.
before it got on Netflix. So this Breaking Bad is arguably as vital to Netflix's success than almost any other show that has ever been on the streaming service other than The Office, like you said. And then the last thing is that Vince Gilligan got his start on the X Files, which is that's a pretty good show to get your start on.
Yeah.
But for him to create this and just the Breaking Bad verse in general, between this Better Call Saul and even the El Camino movie, which I liked it. I didn't think it was like one could argue it's like, was this needed?
Yeah.
But
It didn't blow me away, but I enjoyed it.
I still enjoyed it, absolutely. But for him to create this, Vince Gilligan is among one of the greatest television creators and producers of all time.
Absolutely.
And you're never going to convince me otherwise until the next guy. That's it. And,
Right.
no. So, Mike, thanks for chatting with me about Breaking Bad, about its greatness and everything like that. This is obviously high recommend from
Yeah.
from both of us. So check it out on either is it still on Netflix? I think it's still on Netflix, but
Yes.
you can also find it on I believe AMC Plus, which why is that a thing? But
Well, I guess if you're an Amazon Prime kind of person, that makes sense. My parents did AMC Plus for when they were catching up with Better Call Saul because that was their only option. But otherwise, so yeah,
I suppose.
yeah.
Or you can watch the physical media of it. And this is just one last attempt to be like, hey, physical media is still a thing. We should
Yeah.
support that because I believe physical media pays out more than streaming rights stuff do long term, I suppose. But I don't know about that. But I just made up a weird stat. Mike, thanks again. Where can the people find you?
Well, still not looking to be found yet. I also kind of don't really have like a public, anything that I really put out to the public. Everything I have right now is just kind of private, for friends and family, blah, blah, blah. But I am working on a project that I'll have hopefully done by time we do this again, whenever that is. And then I'll be able to actually give you a real answer to that question.
Okay, way to dodge the subject. It's all good. That's going to do it for this episode of SPDM TV. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to anything and everything wherever you get your podcast. Join us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Blue Sky at SPDM Crew. Check out our website. Check out our website at com. Shout out to High Flyer Creative Studios for making our awesome logo. Greatly appreciate their support. And if you have any creative needs, contact them at highflyercreative.com. Check out the other shows in our network. We've got a lot of great content on there, and I'm really proud of the work that everyone's doing. We've got a ton of different things that you could ask for. So check out the other shows on our network. And if you've got a podcast idea or you're interested in being part of the SPDM crew as a guest or collaborating, email us at gmail.com. Until next time, happy watching, friends.